Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining me today. We're going to dive into a fascinating topic, understanding social conflict theory and its impact on criminology. This presentation will explore how power, inequality, and justice shape our society and influence the legal system. I'm excited to guide you through these important concepts and their real-world implications. Let's get started. Social conflict theory sees society primarily as a competition for limited resources, where inequalities in power, wealth, and status are central. Rather than viewing social order as a result of agreement or harmony, this theory suggests it's maintained through domination and control. It highlights social life as an ongoing struggle between different classes and groups, with those in power using their position to exploit others and preserve their privilege. This perspective helps us understand the root causes of social tensions and inequalities. Social conflict theory in criminology helps us understand how laws and social norms are not neutral but actually reflect the interests of the powerful groups in society. Essentially, those in positions of power influence what is considered acceptable behavior and what is punishable. As a result, crime is often seen as a byproduct of social and economic inequalities. People commit crimes as a response to unfair circumstances or limited opportunities. Another important point is how marginalized populations tend to be labeled as criminals more frequently, which further stigmatizes and disadvantages them. Dominant groups benefit from this because they use legal definitions of crime to maintain the existing social order and protect their privileged positions. This perspective really highlights how crime and justice are tied to larger social and power dynamics. When we talk about social conflict theory in criminology, there are several key concepts to keep in mind. First, power struggles are central. Dominant groups use laws as tools to maintain control over others, shaping who gets targeted and how. Then, inequality plays a big role. Differences in wealth, education, and opportunities can push people toward criminal behavior, often as a response to their circumstances. Social class ties into this as well, since those in lower socioeconomic groups tend to face harsher criminalization compared to wealthier individuals. Another important idea is labeling. Once someone is branded as a criminal, that label becomes a way to exert social control, influencing how they are treated and how they see themselves. Lastly, competition between groups for limited resources impacts both crime rates and law enforcement practices. All these concepts together help us understand the complex relationship between society, power, and crime. Here, we see some clear examples of how social conflict theory helps us understand crime and justice. First, white-collar crime committed by elites is often ignored or punished very lightly. This shows how those with power can avoid serious consequences. On the other hand, poor communities face intense policing and tougher penalties for street crimes, highlighting an unequal application of law enforcement. Similarly, drug laws tend to disproportionately target marginalized ethnic groups, reinforcing systemic bias. Lastly, political dissent can be labeled as criminal behavior, used as a tool to suppress opposition and maintain control by those in power. These examples illustrate how crime and punishment are deeply connected to social inequality and power dynamics. According to social conflict theory, the criminal justice system is not neutral but serves primarily to protect the interests of the elite. One major issue arising from this perspective is the over-policing of impoverished and minority neighborhoods, where law enforcement presence and actions are disproportionately concentrated. This ties into the idea of selective enforcement, where laws are applied unevenly, often favoring powerful groups and ignoring or harshly penalizing less privileged communities. These dynamics result in significant disparities in sentencing and incarceration, with marginalized populations facing tougher outcomes. Moreover, legal institutions can sometimes be weaponized to suppress political opposition, further reinforcing the dominance of established power structures. Overall, this theory highlights how the criminal justice system can reinforce existing inequalities rather than promote fairness. Social conflict theory has been influential, but it also faces some important critiques and limitations. First, it tends to put too much emphasis on economic causes of crime, often overlooking cultural and psychological factors that also play a significant role. Another critique is that it views laws primarily as tools of oppression, which can ignore the fact that many laws serve legitimate social functions to maintain order and protect citizens. Additionally, the theory is sometimes seen as overly deterministic, meaning it doesn't always give enough credit to individual choices and personal responsibility. It also falls short in providing detailed explanations about why specific individuals commit crimes. Because of these limitations, it's helpful to combine social conflict theory with other perspectives to get a more complete and nuanced understanding of criminal behavior. To sum up, the social conflict theory helps us understand that crime is deeply connected to social inequality and the ongoing struggles for power within society. One key point is that laws often reflect the interests of dominant groups, which means they can criminalize marginalized communities unfairly. This bias continues within the criminal justice system itself, where practices tend to perpetuate these inequalities rather than eliminate them. Recognizing crime through this perspective makes it clear that we need systemic change that focuses on social justice and promotes fairness. It's crucial that law enforcement and policy decisions prioritize equity to create a more just and balanced legal system for everyone.